With set 11 around the corner, now is a good time to ask whether or not set 10's mechanic, headliners, were a mistake or not. You may be surprised, but this mechanic has been very controversial and very divisive. There are those who love this mechanic because it instantly grants a 2-star copy of a champion with a powerful bonus, but for those same reasons, others hate it. I mean, Milk didn't play set 10 at all because of this one mechanic. And a lot of players agreed that the hidden rules behind headliners were the biggest issue of them all, as knowing these rules made a huge difference. And with the introduction of set 10, bag sizes were also nerfed across the board. Those bag size changes were a huge source of frustration for many players, myself included, and surprisingly these changes aren't getting reverted for set 11. But why aren't Riot reverting these changes? Did headliners bring value to set 10 or were they only a pain? And how did Riot prove me wrong with set 10? But before we get into that, I've been looking back at set 10 with this being one of the last videos I'll make for it. And I'd like to thank you guys for my explosive growth in this set. My sub count tripled, both Mortdog and a duck shouted me out, and I got my first paycheck from YouTube a day before my birthday as well, so that was pretty nice. So honestly, thank you all for the support, from watching to subscribing to following, you're all amazing. Thank you. But now let's talk about the bag size changes. According to the Learnings article, the bag size changes were specifically made to address how frequent 3-star, 4 and 5 costs were, and not caused by the introduction of headliners. And with headliners gone for set 11, Riot will instead change the shop odds per level rather than revert the bag size changes. Now, I will say that I initially thought that this was awful, and in set 11 it'd be impossible to 2-star a 4 or 5 cost, let alone 3-star them if they're remotely contested. But honestly, now after giving it some more thought, I think Riot's approach may be the best solution. The odds of hitting your uncontested units should be higher, but with the smaller bag sizes remaining, several players still won't be able to play around the same units. And of course, keeping these reduced bag sizes will maintain the intended goal of greatly reducing the number of 3-star, 4 and 5 costs. I'm guessing Riot wants to promote players being flexible by playing around which units are uncontested and move TFT away from being a drafting game where you only aim for meta compositions. So this change should promote flex play whilst also preventing meta comps from being too common and in turn too oppressive. That's honestly a pretty smart way to nerf the meta, just make it less accessible so less players can play it. Pretty simple. However, I will say that headliners heavily contradict that because it instantly grants you a 2-star copy of a unit. This is very warping because instantly getting a 2-star copy of a higher cost unit, especially if their meta, is way too powerful. This was especially true for 5 cost headliners at level 9, which in turn had their shop odds gutted because of how reliable and stable it was to rush 9 and buy the first 5 cost headliner you see. But overall, I am hoping these level changes make rerolling feel slightly better. For example, I dislike the fact that if you're rerolling a 2 cost, you do it at level 7, and if you're rerolling a 3 cost, you do it at level 8. Maybe I'm just too used to previous intervals in the past sets, but that just felt a bit weird to me. Anywho's moving on, Jeffrey. Perhaps the biggest controversy with headliners were the hidden rules that they operated under. You may have already seen this video, but these hidden rules were exposed by Leduc, and this video in turn caused a massive stir. These hidden rules vastly changed how you could play around headliners, and in turn there was an outcry from competitive players for more transparency about these rules. This was a huge problem with headliners. Initially, there were rules that could both positively and negatively affect your gameplay, and that should never be a thing. In that case, those rules should never be hidden so you can understand what's going on. For example, imagine if shadow items still had the negative effects, but they never told you about them. That would be absolutely awful to play around. Hidden rules should never negatively affect your gameplay. If anything, hidden rules should only ever have positive effects, such as mitigating low rolls or bad outcomes like getting no items from Krugs. But with headliners, the hidden rules resulted in a situation where knowing the rules was great and not knowing was awful. This issue was eventually resolved in patch 14.3, and headliners that appeared were mostly out of players' control. That's good for both casual and competitive players because now there weren't any arbitrary rules that you had to know to not impede your gameplay. And that's the point of hidden rules. As the devs have made it clear multiple times in the past, some rules are hidden to not overwhelm players in a game that already has an abundance of information for you to take in. For example, they're introducing a new hidden rule in set 11 where if you get an augment that grants you +1 of a trait, then you're no longer able to get offered other sources of emblems like Tome. And a hidden rule you may not be aware of is salvage bin being disabled if the portal is item payout. Hidden rules like this are completely fine because they limit extreme outliers and improve the overall experience, and players don't really notice them. However, the issue does persist where this information needs to be accessible to players to maintain competitive integrity and keep those who want to know informed. Transparency is key for these players. I mean, maybe Mortdog's new website, TFT Hub, will address this once it's released. I'm actually really excited to see what this comes out to be. Hopefully this centralized hub of information fills that player need. But still, for a few patches, the hidden rules behind headliners allowed for some absurd optimizations that you could capitalize on to have a clear advantage on some players. That just wasn't fair. Anyway, due to headliners, augments that grant +1 to a trait were also removed. And due to that, all prismatic traits could have an insane amount of power attributed to them, and in turn, getting spatulas off carousel or PvE rounds was incredibly powerful. Honestly, I like that those trait augments are removed. Overall, I found augments to be a lot less linear and bland in set 10 compared to set 9. +1 trait augments in general are just kind of boring. But one thing I absolutely hated in this set was the insane value of getting a spatula. In general, I'm not a spatula enjoyer, but my god, getting a spat in set 10 could spike your ball power tremendously, especially when combined with the headliner for that trait. I found this so cringe for Pentakill, KDA, Heartsteel and True Damage, because those verticals are literally stronger than everything else, so getting a spat in any of these was just so absurdly strong. Also, due to headliners and spats, I really disliked the fact that these prismatic traits were super inaccessible. For example, in all of my hundreds of games this set, I never hit 10 Heartsteel ever. I just felt like gating these high verticals behind these spats and headliners was just really frustrating because I could never get there. But I will admit that Riot did prove me wrong with set 10. Back in my video, will set 10 have worse balance, I said that the number of unique mechanics in set 10 may lead to numerous hotfixes and balance thrashing every other week due to the slow patch cadence. And here we are, at the end of set 10, where the only hotfix was for a tournament patch. This patch did not thrash the meta and was mostly addressing bugs. So Riot proved me categorically wrong, and I'm glad to admit it. The dev team clearly went above and beyond to maintain a good balance this set, especially for the Vegas Open, and it clearly shows. So I've got nothing but praise and respect for the dev team for pulling this off, even after the issues in set 9. But having said that, I honestly will say that I think headliners were a mistake. Personally, while this is definitely a far better version of the chosen mechanic, I just think the warping nature of instantly granting a 2-star copy of a unit is just fundamentally flawed, especially when you consider higher cost units. But that's not to say set 10 was bad or the other mechanics were mistakes. I mean, portals were so successful that they will be permanently in TFT. And the introduction of Steadfast Heart and the solidification of the item system was so good, they're adding 20 new artifacts in set 11. And the music was a slam dunk. From so many genres to so many beats, the music this set hit so hard. It makes me so sad that this music will soon be gone forever. Hopefully in the future they'll add something like a TFT jukebox so you can play music from the past. That would be sick. But overall, I definitely think set 10 is probably one of the best TFT sets ever. But I am ready to move on from headliners. Speaking of, I just saw the teaser for set 11 and I loved it. I'm really excited to see what it brings. But yeah, now I'll pass over some questions to you guys. What are your thoughts on headliners? Did you love them? Did you hate them? Are you glad they're gone? And finally, are you excited for set 11? Let me know in the comments and remember to subscribe. Anyway, check out these other videos if you want to see more from me. And as always, truly, thank you for watching and I'll catch you in the next one.